So, ladies and gentlemen, can I start it? Thank you for coming last session. My presentation is Web Application Exploit 101. Through this conference, it's a lot of the penetration test presentation. It's very awesome conference there, content there. But today, I will be talking about the web application penetration test, especially focus on the breaking the access control, at the same time focus on the business logic abuse. This is kind of a little bit traditional vulnerability, but still it's very important that we focus on today. So, first of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Tomo, and I'm Japanese security consultant, 8 years experience now. And specialty is kind of a lead team staff, such as the web application penetration test, or network penetration test, or incident response, or security consultation, or vulnerability management, or security awareness. That kind of stuff. At the same time, I am a part-time Ph.D. student now. I have a bunch of the speakers in the United States, for example, SoundSpire 2011, or DEFCON, or LASCON, or that kind of stuff. Also, I have a bunch of the certifications such as CISSP or GIAC. So this is my profile. So today's talk overview is, first of all, goal. What is the goal? The goal is share my experience of web application penetration tests, especially focus on the access control abuse and business logic. The reason why I focus on this vulnerability, because this vulnerability can be discovered by only my manual testing. So what does it mean? There is a bunch of security scanners, such as Web App Spider, or Web Inspect, or AppScan, but still, in terms of the find out the access control vulnerability, it is only help in some particular parts, only help only small parts. So that is why I'd like to share how to find out this vulnerability by the manual testing. This is the goal of my presentation. So here's the agenda here. First of all, I'd like to quickly look at the web application security overview first, and then I will be discuss about the access control abuse and business logic abuse and WAPT app. So let's go one by one. But before that, there is a disclaimer. First of all, this is my source, and you are not my employer as a first of all. And second of all information provided on my slide are for educational purpose only. Don't abuse this stuff in the external side. Also, do not try to exploit this technique in the exploit environment without necessary permission. When I do the penetration testing, we have some sort of getting the permission, which is called the jail-free card. But without the permission, we will have some legal problems. So do not try without the permission. This is the third step. Also, I welcome any question, but please speak slowly and easily, because I am a non-native speaker actually. So this is the disclaimer here. So let's look at the first look at the issue one by one. The first, we'd like to look at the web application security overview. So if you look at if you consider the web application vulnerabilities, there is a bunch of the vulnerabilities such as the SQL injection or cross-site scripting. There's a lot of the vulnerability there. One of the good resources to understand what the vulnerability is, there is a WASP Top 10 is a very great resource to understand what kind of the vulnerability. So as I said, we focus on the vulnerability of the access control and business logic. This is classified A4 and A7. We focus on this part. Also, in the testing methodology, if you try to start some penetration test in your company, I definitely recommend to have testing methodology. Having testing methodology is very important in order to keep the consistency and also as a process. So there is a bunch of good resources about the testing methodology, such as the penetration test execution guide or WASP guide, testing guide. These are very great resources. At the same time, if you want to start the career of a penetration test, I definitely recommend to have some testing environments. There's a bunch of the testing environments here. For example, Web Security Dojo by Marvin Security. It's great resources. Also, WASP BWA, Breaking Web Application. It's an inactive project, but it's still very great resources. At the same time, Vostra.net is also great resources. It's actually inactive, but still it's working. Also, Samurai WTF is a still good environment to test a web penetration test. Actually, in the DerbyCon in 2016, one guy said he tried to release the version 4 of the Samurai WTF, but this is not still available not available now, but it will be coming soon. Also, if you're curious about the GIS field, I definitely recommend to read the GIS 2 book. It's a great resource here. So, I already discussed about the web application testing category. When I do the penetration test, there is a two type of the test there. The first one is automated scan. The other one is a manual testing. So what is an automated scan? It's basically have a configuration and kick the scan. This is the automated testing. There is a pro and con there. The positive side of the automated scan is there is a very powerful methodology to find out the parameter manipulation, such as SQL injection or cross-site scripting. Also, it's very easy to use it. So even though the maturity level of the penetration test in your company is not so sophisticated, but still the GIS scanner guarantees the certain level of penetration test. So that is why this is very powerful in the positive side. But at the same time, there is a negative side, which is there is a false positive. At the same time, there is a false negative. Also, there is a lot of the limitation to some vulnerability, such as access control cannot find out, GIS2 cannot find out these vulnerabilities. Also, sometimes when we do the scan with the scanner, its impact on the system. So there is a couple negative side there. On the contrary, in the manual testing side, basically what we have to do is using the knowledge of the penetration test first. At the same time, we utilize a local proxy, such as burp suite or feeder or ZAP proxy. So the positive side, you can find out any vulnerability if you have the skill, but at the same time, in the negative side, is a very time-consuming technique. Also depends on the skill of the penetration tester. There is a pro and con there. But in usual penetration testing, we combine these techniques at the same time in order to seek the efficiency. So I want to be focused on some sort of the negative side of automated scanning. Actually, there is a couple of limitations in automated scanning. Actually, there is two research there. One of the research came from the DHS, Department of the Homeland Security. They had a report that they said 67% of high impact vulnerability require manual testing. So what does it mean? Is still automated scanning is very powerful, but still there is a limitation. Also, another company, Nomura Research Security, NRI Security Technologies, it is a Japanese security company. It's revealed that 24% of the access control vulnerability classified as critical. And discovering the access control vulnerability needs understanding of web application design and extremely difficult to detect the access control issue with the scanning. So that is why there is a bunch of the limitation there. So now I want to be since we discussed about some sort of limitation of these tools, now we'd like to discuss actual vulnerability is. So first of all, we'd like to see the access control abuse. So, before starting the discussion, what is the access control? The access control sometimes say authorization. So basically, access control allow access to resource only to those who are permitted. In other words, so access control violation or access control abuse mean someone who are not permitted can access some resources. This is the meaning of the vulnerability. So let me explain what the access control abuse in some sort of a picture. So actually, technically, there is two classification there, which is horizontal access control abuse and vertical access control abuse. In order to explain this concept, I'd like to show here is some sort of picture of the insurance company internal system. So here, this vertical line means the privilege level. Here's an unauthenticated area. After authenticated, there is a privilege level there. Of course, administrator is a high privilege. On the contrary, the vertical line here mean the width, mean the coverage of the available data. For example, agency in the insurance company can only see the customer data of the agency, for example. So that is very low privilege. On the contrary, for example, regional Y underwriter can see the data of agent C and agent D. Yeah, agent D and some sort of data, accounting data of the regional Y. Please imagine this system. So I'd like to explain what does it mean of the horizontal access control and what does it mean of the vertical access control abuse. So first of all, horizontal access control abuse. So basically, horizontal access control is kind of a horizontal abuse. Like, for example, agent A can see the data of the agent B, for example, or agent C can see the data of the agent D, or underwriter X can see the data of the underwriter Y. This kind of the access control abuse we classify horizontal access control abuse. So there's a bunch of the synonyms here. For example, some people said this is impersonation, some people called spoofing, some people said data layer access control abuse. But there's a lot of the variety of the words, but this is the basic concept of the horizontal access control. I give another example here. Let's imagine some sort of shopping site, and then user A can see some purchase history here, like the Amazon. If you click the link, user sends your HTTP request and show the details. In order to identify the details, they send you an ID, such as the historical ID here. But if you change the number of ID from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, maybe we can see the data of another person. This is a kind of a horizontal access control. Does it make sense? So let's go to another one, which is the vertical access control abuse. This vertical access control is kind of a vertical stuff. So let's say, for example, here, one of the abuse is agent D can see the underwriters, can use the underwriter function, or corporate planning guy can abuse the function of administrator's function. This is kind of a vertical access control abuse. In other words, some people said it's privilege escalation. The other word. Also, another variety here is here. Unauthenticated user can abuse the function of the authenticated user. For example, unauthenticated user accesses some specific URL and then can see the agency data. Sometimes we say this is an authentication bypass. This is another type of the access control abuse. Another synonym here is some people call this is business logic access control abuse. But there's a bunch of the words there, but this is the basic concept of vertical access control abuse. Here is another example here. In case of the shopping site, if you access to the user A, of course, user A is an ordinary access, have ordinary users. But if you access to the administrator URL, maybe if this guy can see the data of administrator, and if this guy can abuse the administrator function, this is vertical access control abuse. So this is the second type of access control abuse. So basically, there's a lot of since depends on the application, depends on the complexity of the system, but basic concept of access control is two types here. So maybe so through this presentation, I explain about what is the mechanism of access control abuse. At the same time, I think you understand it is difficult for automated scanner to find out this problem, because the access control is defined by the human being, or defined by design, defined by a business requirement. So that is why it is hard to teach this stuff to the automated scanning. So it is defined by the human. Of course, in the future, maybe we can teach about it, but in current situation, it is very hard to teach this stuff. So scanner cannot judge whether or not the phenomena is deserved to the access control violation, or it is not deserved to the access control violation. Scanner cannot judge that. So that is why we need a manual testing. So question is, so we have to do some manual testing here. We understand it. The question is, how can we find out this vulnerability? Just the question. The answer is, in the high-level overview, there is a most important principle here. The most important principle to find out this vulnerability is understanding web application design, application behavior, and the meaning of each parameter as much as possible, of course. If you understand the web application very well and understand application design, you can find out this vulnerability. But, of course, this is the most basic principle. In the penetration test, we have a couple techniques to find out this vulnerability. Today I introduced three kinds of technique here, which is called targeting, diffing, and fuzzing. So let's look at them one by one. The first one is targeting. It's a very easy concept. Basically, one of the techniques is to focus on some suspicious name parameters or suspicious name points. For example, suspicious parameter names such as customer ID or historical ID, page ID, role ID, or approval flag. It's kind of the parameters which looks like control the access. We try to find out these parameters and try to focus on and manipulate it. This is one of the focus. The other point usually we can see it is a cookie. Sometimes some application issue the cookie such as model equal 1. If you change to the model equal 1 to 2, maybe behavior will be changed, for example. Or some applications still issued user equal John. Maybe if you change to the Bob, maybe the behavior will be different. So we focus on this kind of stuff. The other point is the URL. If you look at here, the contents /1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Maybe if you change the 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, maybe different contents is available. So let's look at some sort of example. Vostra is very famous vulnerable application. So usually, if you work on the freshman in my company, I ask them to do the penetration test on this system. There's a lot of the learning here. But for example, here there is a registration page here. You put the name and email and password, and then there's a crappy secret question there. What's your favorite color? It's not a secret question, but anyway. But try to input this information and send your request. If you look at this request here, there is a role ID, a role equal you maybe. There is a role ID, a role equal you. So maybe you mean the user. So that is why, as a penetration tester, what we have to do is change to the A, for example. If we change to the A, maybe A means the administrator, for example. If we change to the S, maybe mean the supplier. So we try to do this kind of stuff in these cases. Actually, the targeting is very powerful, easy, but very powerful technique here. But here's a caveat here. So some application has exploited suggestion-oriented naming, but some applications do not provide any clue for testing. So this is a kind of example the other application has. This is a kind of an image of the HTTP request I saw in previously. For example, here, if you look at here, there is no clue of what each parameter meaning. So I don't understand what is the meaning of each parameter here. So because there is no name here, since I don't have any career of the developer, how can it possible to create this kind of HTTP request? I'm not sure, but still, we can see this kind of a request here. But there is no evidence or no clue to find out the meaning of each parameters. So in this case, targeting technique doesn't work at all. So in this cases, we use a different technique called the diffing. The diffing is originally exploit analysis technique. So if you're familiar with the exploit analysis technique, diffing is a very famous technique that basically compared, in the context of the exploit analysis technique, diffing is basically get the binary before the patching and then apply the patch and gain the patched version. And then try to compare the binary between the before the patch and after the patch and find out the vulnerability. This is the diffing in the exploit analysis context. But in the web application testing context, HTTP diffing means HTTP request difference analysis. So before I explain the concept, so let me share the assumption of this technique. As you know that HTTP protocol is a stateless protocol. So that is why all behavior of web application are decided by HTTP requests. So do you understand what I mean? So basically all behavior decided by HTTP requests. In other words, the difference of HTTP requests characterize the difference of the behavior. So this is a basic assumption to discuss about the diffing. So what is the diffing? So diffing is basically compare the almost similar HTTP requests and find out a unique attribute that makes application behavior different. So I usually compare the HTTP requests in different user, same role, same page, for example, or different user, different role and same pages, or different user, different role, similar pages. By comparison, we can see what attribute change the behavior. So let's discuss about an example. For example, this HTTP request is showing the order history detail. Like if we click here, application send this request. So we try to find out some parameter like the history ID from here, but there is no clue here. So what we try to do in the penetration test, create the two HTTP requests. First of all, logging as a user A to access to the order history detail and capture the HTTP request here. And then I log in again as user B and access to the order history and then create the HTTP request of order history details. And then we gain the two HTTP requests and try to compare kind of the diffing here. This is the kind of the tool of a GUI version of diff command here. So basically we compare the requests. The red part is a kind of the is a difference between the two requests. So one of the difference is a cookie HTTP session value, session ID value here. Of course, it's different because different user. Also, this parameter is also different. Also, this parameter is different. Because of the comparison, we can focus on these three parameters. Of course, the session ID is usually different. So that is why I ignore it. But we focus on the two parameters to find out whether or not there is a vulnerability. For example, try to log in as a user A again and create the HTTP request and then change the value from the 3910 to 3913 and then send your request. In this case, I can see the data of the user B, maybe we can abuse the access control vulnerability. If it doesn't work, I try another one and whether or not there is a vulnerability. The diffing can reveal which parameter have the potential vulnerable application, vulnerable parameters. Does it make sense for you guys? Cool. I showed you another example in the vertical access control abuse here. Here is a David. It's a web code. It's also vulnerable application. David is a manager, and manager can see the several employee or several team members. Here is a Blues under the David, and since David is a manager, he can see the profile of the Blues. If you click this link, HTTP request like this. On the contrary, if you're looking at the John is an administrator. Since he is an administrator, they can see the all employees, of course, including the Bruce. Also, this guy is an administrator. He can delete the data of the employee. If you click the delete profile, request is like this. So in these cases, this is the situation. So the question is it possible to abuse the access control with David privilege? Well, basically the manager manager don't have a right to delete the profile. But question is it possible to delete this guy data with a manager privilege? This is the question. So in order to find out this vulnerability, it's very simple cases. You don't need to do it realistically, you don't need to do it different, but I'd like to explain the different concept, this example. For example, in these cases, try to compare the HTTP requests of the different user, different role, and similar function. If you compare about these two requests, there's several differences there, maybe 1, 2, 3, 4. Of course, in these cases, action equal view profile and action equal delete profile is the most doubtful parameters. So in these cases, what we try to do it's access to the David again, and click the Bruce and click the view profile, and then change the value from the view profile to the delete profile, and then send your request. Sorry. Then we can confirm that data is deleted. So the diffing is kind of the diffing technique. It's very useful to find out which parameter is most suspicious. Maybe you think it's that we showed the example in the vulnerable application. Is it working in the reality world? Yes. I showed some sort of example in the reality cases. Here is a situation that there is a medical practice management software. This software manages the patient medical history or operation management. And there is a testing situation like this. There is a two account here, which is one of them is called front office, which is kind of a receptionist privilege. He or she can make a reservation of the patients, or some sort of doing some of the accounting for the accounting of the patients. This privilege has a my account function. Basically, they can change the user information, kind of the name or phone number or that kind of stuff. On the contrary, the other privilege is the administrator. They have the user management function. The administrator can change any user information, including the user privilege. This is the situation. So here, there is a My Account page of the receptionist privilege here. If you access to these pages, you can change the username or a bunch of the information such as tax ID or maybe phone ID or that kind of stuff. If you click the save here, this application issues the HTTP request, action equal user, method equal update user. On the contrary, if you access to the administrator privilege and go to the user management page, and then since user management pages, you can manage any users. So go to the test office, front office. Front office, it's the same as previous example. And then in these pages, since he is the administrator, he can change the access control level. If you click here, it hit the update, it sends your request, like action equal user and method is update user. The question is, the request looks like similar, right? So if we compare it like this, it looks similar. So I used some sort of the tool here. If we compare the two requests, here is a user request. Here is a HTTP request of my account function with front office privilege. This is the HTTP request of user management of front office as an administrator. So basically, there is a difference is adding the parameter in these cases. So basically, in the user management pages, basically what this application do is adding some parameters and then give us some sort of more privilege. So if you analyze some sort of a difference, here is the role ID here. So if you find out some sort of a difference, my hypothesis is next. If you add it to the role ID here, maybe we can change the access control at the same time. This is a reasonable hypothesis, right? So through the comparison analysis, if we add it to this parameter, if I add the role ID here, maybe we can change the access control at the same time, even though the receptionist. So this is my hypothesis. Again, I added the role ID equal 1. Here is the role ID 5, but through the analysis, I understand the role ID equal 1 means administrator privilege. So if we added this parameter to the original request, maybe we can abuse this problem. So let's try it. So what we have to try to do is to go to the user again as a receptionist privilege, go to the My Account, hit the Save, capture the HTTP request, and intercept the HTTP request, and add it to this parameter, load ID equal 1, and then release it. And then, if you look at here, previously only few menu there, but after that we can see the bunch of the information, a bunch of the menu here. So what does it mean is that we can have the privilege escalation by adding some parameters. How can you, so diffing is a very powerful technique to understand which parameter is potentially vulnerable in terms of the access control. I show you a couple of examples here. So actually this technique is very powerful. Most Vostra application, I have the penetration test is each pages or each HTTP request had a 1,000 parameter in each time. It's crazy. But I try to kill my sales guy, but since they have the contract, and also as a service level, they agree that we have a manual testing in order to find out the access control vulnerability. So I have to test 1,000 parameter, but I don't want to waste the time. So that is why by using some sort of diffing, try to find out the potentially vulnerable parameters and focus on this stuff. So that is why it's very useful in the reality world. If the diffing is not workable in the web application, usually works, but if it doesn't work, final method is a fuzzing. And basically try to change the parameter value randomly. But it's very tough and it's very time consuming, so this is the final technique. So in terms of the remediation of the access control, basically access control problem should be the part of the web application design process. Usually the reason why this problem will be implemented is because access control is brought on afterwards. So that is why these kind of design should be implemented before the implementation should be done in the design process. Also, define in the development process, you should define who can access what. So I think the access control matrix, like which user can access which function, is very helpful. Usually when I do the penetration test on the client, usually I ask, do you have any access control matrix? If you say, yes, we have it, usually they don't have a vulnerability. But on the contrary, if I don't have it or we don't have it, usually there is a vulnerability. So that is why having these kind of a matrix in the design process is very critical. So let's look at some business logic abuse here. Before discussing the business logic abuse, what is a business logic? In terms of the penetration test definition, I think one of the definitions is business logic in the application is model real-life business objectives. the business rule and workflow drive the application. So what I try to do, so basically the business logic on the web application mean try to modeling the real world operation. So based on this definition, what the business logic abuse? The business logic abuse is abusing inappropriate modeling. In terms of the finding out these vulnerabilities, there is a lot of abusing vulnerability. There is no systematic approach to find out these vulnerability. So basically, tons of the example here. I write down a couple example here. For example, buy some product in the shopping site with $1, is still this problem there. Or there's some vulnerability called alchemy in the financial system. I give you some sort of example, alchemy vulnerability. Actually, it is discovered in the Japanese bank internet application. It's become the news in the Bloomberg. But I'd like to explain some sort of how to abuse this kind of business logic abuse. So the assumption of the alchemy in the banking internal system, there is one system in the banking institution, and this system has an emergency mode to change the foreign exchange ratio. It is originally for foreign exchange market crash. Of course, a foreign exchange ratio will be decided by the market usually, but if there is some sort of crisis happen, like the default or kind of some financial emergency happen, this system doesn't work. That is why there is an emergency mode there. So what is how to abuse this application here? I give an example here. So first of all, what we have to do is create a banking account in Japanese yen at the same time banking account in the United States. So first of all, deposit in the 1 million Japanese yen to Japanese account. Use the emergency mode and change the currency with a modified ratio by using emergency mode. Usually, 100 Japanese yen equal $1, but by using the emergency mode, banker can change any ratio. So that is why he can change Japanese yen approximately $100 yen usual, but change to the 10 Japanese yen per dollars. Then it's go to the $100K in the United States dollars, and then change the currency with the usual ratio. Go to the usual ratio is 100 Japanese yen per dollars. So what does it mean is that they got $10 million. But it's happened here in 2016. There is a banking account. This is a kind of abuse. But this is kind of one of the example of business logic abuse here. So basically, what we have to do is understand the web application very well. It's very important. Without understanding, it's very difficult to find out this vulnerability. But there is some general guideline to find out this vulnerability. First of all, understanding the business process as much as possible. This is a basic rule one. Also, basic rule number two is to compare the actual business process with the business logic on the web application. We basically check some sort of data, validation, or process, or condition to execute some process, or check some privileges. So basically, with this four perspective, we try to analyze and compare the actual business process and business logic on the web application, and then try to find out some sort of vulnerability. But as a penetration tester, this guideline is very important, but at the same time, knowing the birth example is also helpful. As Sherlock Holmes said, if you know about 1,000 cases, how to solve it, 1,001 case will be easily solved because you know a lot of the case. So basically, based on the theory, I definitely recommend if you want to seek some penetration test career in this field, if you want to try to find out the business logic vulnerability, I definitely recommend to understand the example as much as possible. So there is a bunch of the vulnerability there. Actually, when I do the penetration test in my job, I can earn $1 million in 10 seconds. I earned a lot of the money as much as possible in the foreign exchange trade system. I would be considered to escape to Japan and try to go to the market. But I'm still there. I'm still report to the client. So that is why I'm here and still working now. But there's a bunch of example. Maybe you have some sort of maybe you see some jackpot there. But you have to know a lot of example as much as possible in order to find these vulnerabilities. So here's a wrap up here. What we try to do is share my experiences. Especially, I'd like to focus on how to find these vulnerabilities with the manual testing. Also, what I try to do is manual access control and business logic vulnerability will be discovered only by manual testing. Yes, scanner is very powerful, it's very helpful, but in order to find out these vulnerabilities, you should do the manual testing at the same time. Also, utilize this technique is saving the time in the penetration test life. That's my content. Thank you for coming, and that's all. If you have any question? Cool. Do you guys have a question? Okay, thank you.